A millionaire watched 30 top engineers fail to fix a 2.4B engine until a little orphan girl stepped forward, said just a few words, and left everyone frozen. What she revealed changed their lives forever. Before we unfold this emotional journey of loneliness and grief, let us know your location and subscribe for more powerful stories. The explosion rocked the entire Ferrari manufacturing facility at 6:47 a.m., sending a plume of black smoke billowing from the engine testing bay. Alexander Thornfield, 32 years old and worth $2.4 billion, stood frozen as alarms blared throughout his pristine factory floor. The revolutionary V12 hybrid engine, his company's future, his legacy, had just destroyed itself for the 30th time. "Sir, the combustion chamber is completely destroyed," called out Dr. Martinez, the lead engineer, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "That's another $2 million in damage." Alexander's hands trembled as he surveyed the wreckage. 30 of the world's most brilliant engineers had failed. 30 attempts. 6 months of sleepless nights. His company's stock had dropped 40%, and the board was demanding answers he didn't have. "How is this possible?" he whispered, running his fingers through his dark hair. MIT, Stanford, Cambridge graduates, all of them stumped by one engine design. The engine was supposed to revolutionize automotive manufacturing, delivering unprecedented power while maintaining environmental standards. Instead, it had become his nightmare. Every test ended the same way: catastrophic failure at exactly 847 degrees Celsius. As workers rushed to contain the damage, Alexander noticed something odd. A small figure stood by the visitor's window, watching the chaos with unusual intensity. The child couldn't have been more than 10 years old, wearing a faded blue dress that had seen better days. "Security," Alexander called out. "There's a child in the observation area." "Where are her parents?" Officer Bennett approached the window. "Sir, that's Emma. She's from St. Catherine's orphanage. They bring the kids here sometimes for educational visits. I can escort her back." "Wait," Alexander said, studying the girl's focused expression. While grown men panicked around her, she remained perfectly calm, her bright green eyes analyzing the smoking remains with scientific precision. "How long has she been watching?" "About an hour." "Sir, she arrives every Tuesday at 6 a.m. sharp. The security guards have grown fond of her." Something about the child's unwavering attention made Alexander curious. He approached the window where Emma stood, her small hands pressed against the reinforced glass. "Quite a mess, isn't it?" Alexander said gently. Emma turned to face him, and he was startled by the intelligence burning in her young eyes. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, her voice clear and confident, "your engineers are making a fundamental error in their calculations." Alexander blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "The thermal expansion coefficient," Emma continued, as if discussing the weather. "They're using the wrong materials for the pistons. At 847 degrees, aluminum alloy expands beyond tolerance. You need titanium steel composite with ceramic coating." The factory floor fell silent around them. Dr. Martinez and his team had gathered behind Alexander, their faces showing a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Young lady," Dr. Martinez said condescendingly, "this is very advanced engineering. Perhaps you should return to your coloring books." Emma's eyes flashed with determination. "I don't have coloring books. I have MIT's advanced mechanical engineering textbooks, downloaded them from the library computer." She turned back to Alexander. "Your combustion chamber design creates pressure pockets. The fuel injection timing is 30 milliseconds too late. That's why you're getting incomplete combustion and thermal runaway." Alexander's mouth fell open. These were the exact problems that had plagued them for months, problems that 30 PhD engineers hadn't been able to solve. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Chen, the thermodynamics specialist. "How could a child—" "Because," Emma interrupted, "I see what you don't. You're thinking inside the box of traditional automotive design, but this engine isn't traditional. It needs revolutionary solutions, not conventional ones." Alexander knelt down to Emma's eye level, his heart racing. "Emma, is it? Where did you learn all this?" "St. Catherine's has old computers in the basement. I spend nights reading everything I can find about engineering. Physics, mathematics. The other children think I'm weird, but I can't help it. Numbers and machines make sense to me. People, not so much." "And you think you know how to fix our engine?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I know exactly how to fix it, but I want something in return." Alexander felt his pulse quicken. "What do you want?" Emma's voice grew soft, vulnerable for the first time. "I want a family. I want someone to adopt me. I'm tired of being unwanted, Mr. Thornfield. I'm tired of having brilliant ideas that nobody cares about because I'm just an orphan girl." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He looked at this extraordinary child, orphaned, brilliant, desperate for love, and saw something of himself. He'd built his empire from nothing, driven by the same hunger for acceptance. "Emma," he said carefully, "if you can truly fix this engine, if you can solve what 30 engineers couldn't," he paused, hardly believing his own words, "I'll do more than adopt you. I'll make you the CEO of Thornfield Industries." Gasps echoed throughout the factory floor. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. "Sir, you can't be serious. She's a child." But Alexander was staring into Emma's eyes, seeing a mind that operated on a completely different level. "I'm deadly serious. Emma, do you accept the challenge?" Emma smiled for the first time since he'd been watching her, and it transformed her entire face. "Mr. Thornfield, give me access to your design lab in 48 hours. I'll show you what this little girl can do." 2 days later, Alexander stood outside the design lab at 5 a.m., his coffee growing cold in his trembling hands. Inside that room, a 10-year-old girl was either about to save his company or prove that desperation had driven him completely insane. The security footage showed Emma had barely slept. She'd worked through both nights, surrounded by blueprints, calculations, and empty sandwich wrappers that the kitchen staff had quietly delivered. Occasionally, she'd paused to stare at complex equations she'd written across multiple whiteboards, her young mind processing concepts that challenged seasoned engineers. Dr. Martinez approached, his face grim. "Sir, I've been thinking about this situation. If we're wrong about the child, if this is just elaborate pretense, we'll be the laughingstock of the automotive industry. My reputation, your reputation." Alexander turned sharply. "Robert, 30 engineers with sterling reputations have failed. Maybe it's time to check our egos and see what fresh eyes can accomplish." "She's 10 years old, Alexander. 10. This isn't a fairy tale." Alexander was about to respond when the lab door opened. Emma emerged, her faded dress wrinkled from 2 days of work, her hair disheveled, but her eyes bright with accomplishment. "It's ready," she announced simply. Dr. Martinez scoffed. "Ready? Child, do you understand the complexity of what you're claiming to have solved?" Emma walked past him to Alexander, asked, carrying a tablet displaying her redesigned engine specifications. "Mr. Thornfield, would you like me to explain the modifications, or shall we proceed directly to testing?" Alexander studied the tablet screen, his engineering background allowing him to understand some of the revolutionary changes she'd made. The design was elegant, innovative, completely different from anything he'd seen before. "Emma, this fuel injection system, how did you calculate these timing intervals?" "I created a new algorithm," she replied matter-of-factly. "The traditional approaches assume linear fuel distribution, but in a hybrid system with these power outputs, you need exponential curves with dynamic adjustment protocols." Dr. Chen, who had been silent until now, leaned over Alexander's shoulder to examine the tablet. His face went pale. "These calculations, they're beyond postdoctoral level. Where did she learn this?" Emma shrugged. "I didn't learn it, I discovered it. When you're sitting in an orphanage basement at midnight with nothing but a computer and hunger to prove your worth, you develop unconventional thinking patterns." Alexander felt his chest tighten with emotion. This brilliant child had been languishing in an orphanage, her extraordinary mind ignored by the world. Let's test it, he decided. Emma, would you like to oversee the installation? Actually, Emma said, surprising everyone, I'd prefer if your regular team handled the installation. I want them to see that my design works within their existing protocols. They need to trust the solution, not just witness it. Dr. Martinez looked stunned by her diplomatic wisdom. That's actually quite thoughtful. For the next 4 hours, the engineering team carefully installed Emma's modifications. Alexander noticed how she watched silently, offering suggestions only when directly asked, never condescending, despite clearly knowing more than everyone in the room. She's remarkable, Dr. Chen whispered to Alexander. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. She understands people despite claiming she doesn't. Finally, the moment arrived. The redesigned engine sat in the testing chamber, gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. Emma stood beside Alexander, her small hand surprisingly steady as she prepared to activate the system. Mr. Thornfield, she said quietly, before we start, I want you to know something. Win or lose. These past 2 days, working on a real engineering challenge, have been the happiest of my life. Thank you for believing in me when nobody else would. Alexander knelt beside her, placing his hand on her shoulder. Emma, regardless of what happens next, you've already shown me something extraordinary. You've reminded me why I fell in love with engineering in the first place. Emma smiled and pressed the ignition button. The engine roared to life, with a sound unlike anything they'd ever heard, smooth, powerful, perfectly controlled. The temperature readings climbed steadily, 700 degrees, 800, 847, 850, 900. The engine continued running flawlessly, its hybrid system delivering unprecedented power outputs while maintaining complete stability. Dr. Martinez stared at the readouts in disbelief. It's impossible. How is it maintaining structural integrity at these temperatures? Emma watched the readings with satisfaction. Because we're not fighting the heat anymore. We're channeling it. The ceramic coating I specified doesn't just resist thermal expansion, it converts excess heat into additional energy through thermoelectric generation. The room erupted in cheers as the engine completed its full power cycle without a single anomaly. Alexander felt tears streaming down his face as he realized this 10-year-old orphan had just saved his company, his legacy, and possibly revolutionized automotive engineering forever. But as he looked at Emma's quiet smile, he knew something far more important had happened. He'd found someone who needed him as much as he'd needed her. Emma, he said, his voice thick with emotion, how would you like to come home with me tonight? We have a lot to discuss about your new position as CEO. Emma's composure finally cracked, and she threw her arms around his neck, sobbing with joy and relief. 6 months later, Alexander stood in his home office watching Emma through the bay window as she played with Duchess, the golden retriever he'd adopted for her 3 weeks after bringing her home. The transformation in both their lives had been extraordinary, though not without challenges that tested them both daily. "Dad!" Emma called from the garden, the word still sending warmth through Alexander's heart. Duchess buried my calculator again. I think she's jealous of mathematics. Alexander chuckled, remembering his initial panic when Emma had called him Dad for the first time. He'd been terrified of failing her, of not knowing how to parent a child whose intelligence far exceeded his own in many areas. The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. Sarah Mitchell, the social worker assigned to their case, arrived for her monthly evaluation. These visits still made Alexander nervous, though Emma had legally been his daughter for 3 months now. "Good morning, Alexander. How are things progressing?" Sarah asked, settling into her usual chair with practiced efficiency. "Challenging but wonderful," Alexander replied honestly. "Emma started at the advanced mathematics program at Columbia last week. She's taking graduate-level courses 3 days per week, while still handling her CEO responsibilities." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And how is she managing that workload? She's still only 11 years old." Before Alexander could answer, Emma burst through the door, Duchess bounding beside her. "Ms. Mitchell, perfect timing. I wanted to show you the new sustainable energy project I'm developing for the company. Emma, Alexander said gently, perhaps Ms. Mitchell would prefer to hear about your social adjustment first. Emma paused, her enthusiasm dimming slightly. This was always the difficult part, convincing adults that despite her intellectual gifts, she was still learning to be a normal child. I've made 2 friends at Columbia, Emma said carefully. Jessica and Michael. They're both PhD candidates, but they don't treat me like a curiosity. We study together every Thursday. And what about children your own age? Sarah inquired. Emma's shoulders tensed, a reaction Alexander had learned to recognize. The neighborhood kids invited me to a birthday party last month. I went, but she looked at Alexander uncertainly. Tell her what happened. Sweetheart, it's okay. Emma sighed. I corrected the boy's robot toy. It wasn't functioning efficiently, and I showed him how to improve the gear ratios. The other children got quiet and started whispering. I realized I'd done something wrong socially, but I couldn't understand what. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Emma, do you feel isolated from peers your age? Sometimes, Emma admitted. But Dad's been helping me understand that being different isn't bad. It just means I have to work harder to connect with people. He's been teaching me about emotional intelligence, which is apparently much more complex than thermodynamics. Alexander felt pride swell in his chest. The past months had been a constant learning experience for both of them. He'd hired Dr. Patricia Reeves, a child psychologist specializing in gifted children, to help them navigate Emma's unique needs. The company transition has been remarkable, Alexander told Sarah. The board was skeptical initially, but Emma's innovations have increased our market value by 40%. She has an intuitive understanding of both engineering and business strategy that astounds everyone. I implement a collaborative leadership style, Emma added seriously. I present ideas and let the adult executives handle personnel management and client relations. I'm learning that being smart doesn't automatically make you wise. Sarah smiled. That's quite mature of you. Emma, are you happy here? Emma looked at Alexander with such pure love that he felt his throat tighten. Ms. Mitchell, for the first 10 years of my life, I felt like I was speaking a language nobody understood. Now I have someone who not only understands my language, but teaches me new ones every day. Dad shows me that intelligence without kindness is just computation. And you've taught me, Alexander added, that success without someone to share it with is just accumulation. Emma makes every day an adventure. Sarah spent another hour observing their interaction, noting how naturally they'd developed routines that accommodated Emma's unique needs while maintaining a loving family dynamic. As Sarah prepared to leave, she pulled Alexander aside. I've never seen a more successful placement. Emma isn't just intellectually stimulated, she's emotionally nourished. And you, Alexander, have found your purpose beyond business success. After Sarah left, Alexander found Emma in her study, working on what appeared to be quantum physics equations. Dad, she said without looking up, I've been thinking about expanding our engine technology into aerospace applications. NASA's been struggling with propulsion efficiency for Mars missions. Alexander sat beside her, marveling at how naturally she shifted between being a brilliant CEO and his daughter seeking approval. Emma, that's fascinating. But first, tell me about your day. How was your literature class? Emma's face lit up. We're reading To Kill a Mockingbird. I finally understand why you made me take humanities courses alongside mathematics. Atticus Finch shows that moral courage is just as important as intellectual capability. Alexander smiled, remembering his decision to ensure Emma received a well-rounded education. And what did you learn from that? That being the smartest person in the room means nothing if you don't use that intelligence to help others. Just like you helped me when nobody else would. Alexander hugged his daughter, knowing that 6 months ago, neither of them could have imagined how perfectly they'd complete each other's lives. But as Emma returned to her equations, Alexander noticed something troubling in her latest calculations, something that would soon test everything they'd built together. The crisis began on a Tuesday morning when Alexander received a call that made his blood run cold. Dr. Harrison Webb, NASA's Director of Propulsion Research, was requesting an immediate meeting regarding Emma's aerospace proposals. Mr. Thornfield, Dr. Webb's voice carried an unusual urgency. We need to discuss your daughter's recent communications with our department. There are some concerning implications we must address privately. Alexander found Emma in the company lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing her latest Mars propulsion designs. At 11 years old, she'd somehow created theoretical frameworks that surpassed NASA's current capabilities. Emma, we need to talk about your NASA correspondence. Emma looked up, her green eyes immediately showing concern. Did I do something wrong? I thought sharing technological advances was collaborative scientific practice. Sweetheart, Dr. Webb is coming here this afternoon. He sounds worried about something in your proposals. Emma's face went pale. Dad, I may have made a significant error in judgment. Alexander felt his stomach drop. What kind of error? Emma pulled up a complex schematic on the main display. My propulsion system doesn't just improve efficiency by 30%, it fundamentally challenges Einstein's restrictions on faster-than-light travel. I may have accidentally designed technology that could revolutionize space exploration in ways that the government considers dangerous. Alexander stared at the equations filling the screens around them. Emma, are you saying you've discovered something beyond current physics? Not discovered. Developed. I found a theoretical loophole in quantum field mechanics that allows for controlled space-time manipulation. But Dad, if this technology fell into the wrong hands, it could be weaponized in ways that make nuclear bombs look primitive. The weight of the situation crashed over Alexander. His brilliant daughter hadn't just solved an engineering problem, she'd potentially created technology that could change human civilization forever. Dr. Webb arrived that afternoon with two government officials Alexander didn't recognize. Emma met them in the conference room with a poise that both impressed and worried her father. Dr. Webb, Emma said formally, I assume you're here about the theoretical implications of my propulsion designs. Miss Thornfield, Dr. Webb replied carefully, you've created something that our best theoretical physicists say should be impossible. How did an 11-year-old child develop technology that surpasses our current understanding of physics? Emma looked at Alexander before responding. Because I don't think like your physicists. I approach problems without preconceived limitations about what's possible. Sometimes being too educated creates mental barriers that prevent breakthrough thinking. One of the government officials leaned forward. Miss Thornfield, do you understand the potential consequences of this technology? Completely, Emma replied. That's why I've only shared the theoretical framework, not the practical implementation protocols. I'm intelligent, not reckless. Alexander felt pride and fear warring in his chest. His daughter was handling this crisis with remarkable maturity, but he could see the weight of responsibility, crushing someone who should be worried about homework, not national security. Emma, Dr. Webb said gently, we need to discuss containing this information. The technology you've developed, it could change everything, or destroy everything, Emma added quietly. I've run probability models on societal impact. The risk factors are significant. The meeting continued for 3 hours, with Emma demonstrating a grasp of geopolitical implications that stunned the adults. Finally, they reached an agreement. Emma would continue her research under government oversight, with her innovations classified at the highest levels. After the officials left, Alexander found Emma sitting in her room, staring out the window, with tears streaming down her face. Emma, what's wrong? Dad, she whispered, I wanted to help people explore the stars. Instead, I created something that scares everyone, including me. What if my intelligence ends up hurting people instead of helping them? Alexander sat beside her, pulling his daughter into his arms. Emma, with great power comes great responsibility. You're learning that lesson earlier than most people, but you're handling it with incredible wisdom. But what if I make the wrong choice? What if I'm too young to make decisions that affect the whole world? Then we'll make those decisions together, Alexander said firmly. You're not alone anymore, Emma. You have a family now, and we face everything as a team. Emma looked up at him with vulnerable eyes. Promise me something, Dad. Promise that if I ever become too focused on being smart, you'll remind me to be kind. Intelligence without compassion is just dangerous computation. Alexander kissed the top of her head, marveling at how this extraordinary child continued to amaze him with her wisdom. I promise, sweetheart, and you promise me something too. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for being brilliant. The world needs minds like yours, even when it's scary. As they sat together watching the sunset, Alexander realized their lives had taken another dramatic turn. Emma's gifts were leading them into uncharted territory that would test not just their family bond, but their understanding of responsibility and power. But as he held his daughter close, Alexander knew they would face whatever came next together, one challenge at a time. The anonymous letter arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered to Alexander's personal office in plain white envelope with no return address. Inside, written in neat handwriting, were words that made his world tilt sideways. Mr. Thornfield, your adopted daughter Emma is not who you think she is. Meet me at Riverside Park, Bench 7, tomorrow at noon if you want to learn the truth about her past. Someone who knows what really happened at St. Catherine's. Alexander stared at the letter, his hands trembling. For 8 months, Emma had been his daughter, his miracle, his greatest pride. But now, ugly questions began surfacing in his mind. How had a 10-year-old orphan acquired such advanced knowledge? Why had no previous adoptive families shown interest in such an obviously gifted child? That evening, Alexander watched Emma explaining quantum mechanics to Duchess, using dog treats to demonstrate particle behavior. She looked so innocent, so genuinely happy. Could there be dark secrets hidden behind those bright green eyes? Dad, you're staring, Emma observed without looking up from her impromptu physics lesson. Is something troubling you? Alexander forced a smile. Just wondering how I got so lucky to have such an amazing daughter. Emma beamed at him, and Alexander felt guilt crushing his chest. How could he doubt this child who'd brought such joy into his life? The next day, Alexander arrived at Riverside Park 15 minutes early, his stomach churning with anxiety. At exactly noon, a woman approached Bench 7, elderly, well-dressed, with kind eyes that somehow looked haunted. Mr. Thornfield, I'm Margaret Chen, former director of St. Catherine's Orphanage. Alexander's breath caught. You sent the letter? Margaret sat beside him, her hands folded carefully in her lap. I resigned 6 months ago because of what I learned about Emma's situation. I've been wrestling with whether to contact you ever since. What do you mean, her situation? Margaret sighed deeply. Emma wasn't just any orphan at St. Catherine's. She was brought to us under highly unusual circumstances when she was 7 years old. No official records, no family history, just a child who spoke multiple languages and could solve mathematical problems that baffled our educational consultants. Alexander felt cold dread building in his chest. Are you suggesting she's not who she claims to be? I'm suggesting, Margaret said carefully, that Emma's extraordinary intelligence may not be natural. The people who brought her to us claimed she was the result of an experimental education program that had been discontinued. They provided substantial funding for her care, but insisted she never learn the details of her origins. The world seemed to blur around Alexander. Experimental program? What kind of program? We were never given specifics, but Emma's capabilities suggest cognitive enhancement beyond normal human parameters. She doesn't just learn quickly, she processes information in ways that seem almost artificial. Alexander's mind raced back over the past months, re-examining Emma's behavior with this new perspective. Her unnaturally mature emotional responses, her ability to understand complex systems instantly, her sometimes robotic way of analyzing social situations. Why are you telling me this now? Alexander asked. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Because despite everything I've learned, Emma is still a child who deserves love and stability. But Mr. Thornfield, you need to know that people are watching your family. The same individuals who funded her care at St. Catherine's have been monitoring her progress through your company. What people? Who's been watching us? I don't know their identities, but they represent interests that view Emma as an asset rather than a child. They've been tracking her technological innovations, her NASA communications, everything. Alexander felt protective rage building inside him. Emma is my daughter. I don't care what kind of program created her abilities. She's a real child with real emotions who needs a real family. Margaret smiled through her tears. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Emma chose well when she decided to trust you. She chose me. Oh, yes. Margaret laughed softly. Emma had been observing your company for months before that engine explosion. She knew exactly when to appear and exactly what to say to convince you to take her seriously. That child orchestrated her own rescue with brilliant precision. Alexander felt his worldview reshaping once again. Emma hadn't just solved his engineering problems. She'd strategically positioned herself to escape a situation she found intolerable. Mr. Thornfield, whatever Emma's origins, she's become more human through your love than any program could have made her. But you need to be prepared. The people who consider her their property will eventually come for her. Alexander stood up, determination hardening in his voice. Let them come. Emma is my daughter, and I'll protect her from anyone who tries to use her. As Margaret walked away, Alexander realized his greatest challenge wasn't Emma's mysterious past. It was ensuring she had a future where she could choose her own destiny. That evening, he found Emma in her study, working on designs for sustainable energy systems. "Dad," she said without looking up, "someone told you about my origins today, didn't they?" Alexander's heart skipped. "Emma, how did you—" Emma finally turned to face him, her eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed ancient despite her young face. "I've been monitoring communications about myself for months. I know someone would eventually reveal the truth about my enhanced cognitive abilities. And you're not upset that I met with Margaret?" Emma smiled sadly. "I'm grateful you went. It shows you care enough about me to seek truth even when it might be painful. Dad, I may not be naturally born, but my love for you is completely genuine." Alexander knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in his. "Emma, I don't care if you're the product of science, magic, or miracles. You're my daughter, and that's never going to change." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you for loving me regardless of what I am." But as Alexander held his extraordinary daughter, he couldn't shake Margaret's warning about the people who still considered Emma their property. The confrontation Alexander had been dreading arrived exactly 3 weeks later, on a crisp October morning when Emma was attending her advanced physics seminar at Columbia. 3 men in expensive suits appeared at Thornfield Industries' main entrance, requesting an immediate meeting with the guardian of Subject 7. Alexander met them in his private conference room, his attorney Richard Hayes seated beside him. The lead man, tall with steel-grey hair and calculating eyes, introduced himself as Dr. Marcus Vance from something called the Cognitive Enhancement Institute. "Mr. Thornfield," Dr. Vance began, his voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We're here to discuss the return of our intellectual property." "I'm not sure what you mean," Alexander replied, though ice was already forming in his stomach. "Emma Chen, though she's apparently taken your surname, was developed through our Advanced Neurological Enhancement Program. She represents 12 years of research and over $50 million in investment. Her current situation is irregular." Richard Hayes leaned forward. "Are you claiming ownership of a child, Dr. Vance? Because that sounds suspiciously like slavery, which was abolished in this country some time ago." Dr. Vance smiled coldly. "Emma is not technically a naturally born human child. She's the result of genetic modification, cognitive enhancement, and neurological programming. Our institute retains proprietary rights to our creations." Alexander felt rage building in his chest. "Emma is my legally adopted daughter. She has thoughts, feelings, dreams. She's not your property. She's been programmed to simulate emotional responses, Dr. Vance continued dismissively. Her attachment to you is merely sophisticated behavioral conditioning designed to ensure survival and development. That's enough, Alexander stood abruptly. Emma chose to trust me, chose to love me, and I chose to love her back. Whatever you did to enhance her capabilities, you created a real person with real consciousness. Dr. Vance activated a tablet, showing video footage of Emma at various ages in what appeared to be laboratory settings. Subject 7 was designed for a specific purpose, advancing human technological capabilities under controlled conditions. Her recent innovations in aerospace technology belong to our institute. Alexander stared at the footage, showing a younger Emma solving complex equations, while technicians observed her through one-way glass. His heart broke imagining his daughter living in such clinical conditions. The child you call Emma has exceeded her programming parameters, Dr. Vance continued. She's developed unpredictable emotional attachments and independent decision-making patterns that compromise her effectiveness. We need to recalibrate her before permanent psychological damage occurs. Recalibrate. Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. Memory modification, emotional dampening, refocusing her priorities on productive research rather than personal relationships. She'll be much happier once we remove these disruptive human attachments. Alexander looked at Richard, who nodded grimly. Dr. Vance, you have no legal standing here. Emma is a United States citizen with full human rights under the law. We have documentation proving she's artificially created intellectual property. No court will recognize the rights of manufactured intelligence over legitimate ownership claims. Then you'll be disappointed to learn, Richard said, producing a thick folder, that I've spent the past month preparing for this exact scenario. Emma's legal status as Alexander's daughter is unassailable, and her contributions to Thornfield Industries are protected under intellectual property laws favoring the inventor, not the investor. Dr. Vance's composure cracked slightly. You don't understand the forces you're opposing, Mr. Thornfield. Emma represents the future of human enhancement. She cannot be allowed to waste her potential on emotional attachments and domestic life. She's 11 years old, Alexander said fiercely. She deserves childhood, family, love, everything you tried to deny her. She's a $50 million investment that belongs to our institute. She's my daughter, and she stays with me. The meeting ended with threats and legal promises from both sides, but Alexander knew this was far from over. As the men left, he immediately called Emma at Columbia. "Dad!" Emma's voice carried instant concern. "Something's wrong. I can hear it in your voice." "Emma, I need you to come home immediately. We have serious matters to discuss." An hour later, Emma sat across from him in their living room, her young face grave as Alexander explained the morning's confrontation. "They want to recalibrate me," Emma said quietly, "remove my emotional connections to make me more productive." "That's never going to happen," Alexander said firmly. "Emma, you're my daughter, not anyone's property." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, there's something I haven't told you. I remember everything, every day in their laboratory, every test, every time they discussed modifying my personality to make me more compliant. I pretended to have limited memories because I thought it would make me seem more normal." Alexander felt his heart breaking for what his daughter had endured. "Emma, you never have to pretend with me. Whatever they did to you, whoever you were before, you're perfect exactly as you are now." Emma looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "They're going to keep coming for me, aren't they?" Alexander pulled her into his arms. "Then we'll face them together. You're not alone anymore, Emma. You have a family now, and families protect each other." But as Alexander held his extraordinary daughter, he realized their real battle was just beginning. Dr. Vance and his institute wouldn't give up easily, and Emma's future, their future as a family, hung in the balance. The question was no longer who Emma had been, but who she would be allowed to become. The legal battle began 3 days later when Dr. Vance filed an emergency injunction claiming Emma was stolen intellectual property being held illegally by Alexander. The media exploded with the story. Millionaire adopts enhanced child genius dominated headlines worldwide. Alexander sat in Richard Hayes's law office, watching news coverage with growing dread. Emma's face appeared on every major network as talking heads debated whether artificially enhanced humans had rights or were simply sophisticated property. The public opinion is split, Richard explained grimly. Half see Emma as a child deserving protection, the other half view her as dangerous technology that needs government oversight. Emma remained remarkably calm, though Alexander noticed she'd stopped eating and barely slept. She spent hours analyzing legal precedents, preparing her own defense with the same methodical precision she applied to engineering problems. "Dad," she said that evening, looking up from law books scattered across the dining table, "I've identified 17 cases where courts ruled on the personhood of artificial beings. The precedents aren't encouraging." Alexander sat beside her, disturbed by how analytically she discussed her own humanity. "Emma, you're not a legal case study. You're my daughter. But legally that distinction matters. Dr. Vance's team filed documentation showing every aspect of my genetic modification, cognitive enhancement, and neural programming. They're arguing I'm sophisticated biotechnology, not a person." The doorbell interrupted them. Alexander opened it to find Dr. Patricia Reeves, Emma's psychologist, holding an official-looking document. "Patricia? What's wrong?" "Alexander, I've been subpoenaed to testify about Emma's psychological profile. They want me to evaluate whether her emotional responses are genuine or programmed behaviors." Emma appeared behind Alexander. "Dr. Reeves, what conclusion did you reach?" Patricia knelt to Emma's eye level. "Sweetheart, in 8 months of sessions you've shown authentic emotional growth, genuine attachment formation, and real psychological development. Whatever enhancements were made to your cognition, your heart is completely human." "But will a court accept that testimony?" Emma asked. "That depends on the judge," Patricia admitted sadly. The preliminary hearing arrived faster than anyone expected. Judge Margaret Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, presided over arguments that would determine Emma's immediate future. Dr. Vance presented his case with clinical precision. "Your Honor, Subject 7 represents proprietary biotechnology developed through 12 years of research. Allowing private individuals to retain possession of our intellectual property sets dangerous precedents for scientific innovation." Richard Hayes stood for the defense. "Your Honor, Emma Thornfield is an 11-year-old girl who thinks, feels, dreams, and loves. She's achieved legal personhood through adoption and cannot be treated as property regardless of her origins." Judge Morrison studied Emma, who sat quietly between Alexander and Richard. "Young lady, do you understand these proceedings?" Emma stood respectfully. "Yes, Your Honor. These people are arguing whether I'm a person or a thing. I understand that my enhanced capabilities complicate that question. But I know what I am. I'm Alexander Thornfield's daughter." "And what makes you believe you're truly his daughter, rather than programmed to believe that?" Emma paused thoughtfully. "Your Honor, I could explain the neurochemical basis of attachment formation, or analyze the probability matrices of genuine versus artificial emotion. But the simplest answer is this: I choose to love him. Every day, I wake up and choose to be grateful for his kindness, choose to trust his guidance, choose to call him Dad. Programming can't create choice. Only consciousness can." Judge Morrison's expression softened. "Dr. Vance, your documentation shows extensive modification of this child's cognitive abilities. But do you have evidence that her emotional capacity or consciousness was artificially created?" Dr. Vance hesitated. "Her attachment behaviors were unexpected developments. We didn't specifically program emotional responses. So her love, her loyalty, her capacity for joy and sadness, these emerged naturally despite your enhancements." "Yes, but then it seems to me," Judge Morrison interrupted, that whatever else you created a person capable of authentic human experience. Alexander felt hope blooming in his chest as the judge continued. However, the legal questions surrounding artificially enhanced humans require careful consideration. I'm ordering a 30-day evaluation period where Emma will remain with Mr. Thornfield while experts assess her psychological status and legal standing. As they left the courthouse, Emma squeezed Alexander's hand. "Dad, whatever happens, I want you to know these months with you have been worth everything. You taught me that being human isn't about how you're made. It's about how you choose to live." Alexander hugged his daughter tightly, knowing the next 30 days would determine their future together. The evaluation period became a media circus. Protesters gathered outside their home daily, some supporting Emma's rights, others demanding government control of dangerous artificial intelligence. Alexander hired security and tried to maintain normal routines, but their lives felt lived under a microscope. Dr. Sarah Chen, the court-appointed psychologist, arrived for Emma's first evaluation session with obvious skepticism. Alexander watched through one-way glass as she began her assessment. "Emma, I want you to describe your earliest memory." Emma sat perfectly still. "I remember being 3 years old in a white room with no windows. A woman in a lab coat was teaching me to read using flashcards. When I read them correctly, she gave me a small piece of chocolate. How did that make you feel?" "Confused. I understood the words immediately, but I didn't understand why she seemed surprised by my comprehension. I thought all children learned that quickly." Dr. Chen made notes. "What about emotional memories? Do you remember feeling loved or cared for during those early years?" Emma's expression grew sad. "The researchers were kind but distant. They provided for my physical needs and intellectual development, but nobody ever held me when I was scared or read me bedtime stories. I learned about love by watching old movies on the laboratory computer." "And when did you first experience genuine emotional attachment?" "The day I met Dad. For the first time, someone looked at me and saw a child who needed protection rather than a project requiring management. When he knelt down to my eye level and listened to my ideas, I felt valued, not for what I could do, but for who I was." Alexander felt tears streaming down his face as he listened to his daughter describe their relationship. Dr. Chen continued the evaluation for hours, testing Emma's emotional responses, moral reasoning, and social understanding. Finally, she spoke privately with Alexander. "Mr. Thornfield, I've evaluated hundreds of children in my career. Emma's emotional responses are not only genuine, they're remarkably mature and well-developed. Whatever cognitive enhancements were made, they didn't diminish her humanity. So you'll recommend she stay with me? I'll recommend more than that. Emma represents proof that consciousness and emotion can emerge naturally, even in artificially enhanced individuals. She's pioneering new understanding of what it means to be human." The second week brought Dr. Michael Rogers, a neurological specialist sent by Dr. Vance's team. His agenda was clearly to prove Emma's emotions were programmed responses rather than authentic feelings. "Emma," Dr. Rogers began coldly, "I want to discuss your attachment to Mr. Thornfield. How do you know these feelings are real, rather than biochemical programming designed to ensure your survival?" Emma considered the question seriously. "Dr. Rogers, how do you know your love for your family is real, rather than evolutionary programming designed to ensure genetic survival? The origin of an emotion doesn't determine its authenticity. Only the experience does." "Doctor." Rogers looked frustrated. "But you were specifically designed to be intellectually superior. How do we know your emotional responses aren't simply sophisticated simulations?" "Because," Emma replied, "if I were programmed to simulate emotions, I would have been programmed to be more compliant and less challenging. Instead, I argue with Dad when I disagree. I get frustrated when he treats me like a normal child, and I worry constantly that I'll disappoint him. These aren't efficient programmed responses, they're messy human emotions." Alexander smiled at his daughter's logic. She was defending her own humanity with the same brilliance she applied to engineering problems. Dr. Rogers spent 3 days testing Emma's neural responses to various stimuli. His final report, reluctantly submitted to the court, confirmed that Emma's brain showed all the patterns associated with genuine emotion, consciousness, and free will. The most powerful testimony came from Dr. Patricia Reeves, who submitted security footage from Emma's sessions, showing her breakthrough moments of emotional growth. The footage showed Emma learning to trust, learning to laugh, learning to be vulnerable. As the evaluation period neared its end, Alexander realized that regardless of the legal outcome, Emma had already proven something profound. Consciousness and humanity weren't about genetics or origins. They were about the capacity to love, choose, and grow. Emma had demonstrated all three beyond any doubt. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Emma herself. On day 23 of the evaluation period, she requested a private meeting with Judge Morrison, claiming she had evidence that would resolve the case definitively. Alexander sat nervously in the courthouse lobby while Emma presented her findings to the judge, Dr. Vance, and their legal teams. Through the closed door, he could hear Emma's clear voice explaining complex concepts with characteristic precision. After 2 hours, the door opened. Dr. Vance emerged, looking shaken and defeated, while Judge Morrison appeared both amazed and troubled. "Mr. Thornfield," the judge called, "please join us. Your daughter has presented some remarkable information." Alexander entered to find Emma standing before a wall of monitors displaying brain scans, genetic analyses, and research documents he didn't recognize. "Dad," Emma said, her voice steady despite obvious emotional strain, "I've been investigating my own origins. What I discovered changes everything." Judge Morrison gestured to the displays. "Emma has proven that Dr. Vance's institute did not create her enhanced abilities. They discovered them." Alexander looked confused. "What do you mean?" Emma activated another screen showing genetic comparison charts. "Dad, my cognitive enhancements aren't artificial. They're natural mutations that occur in approximately 1 in 50 million births. The institute didn't create me. They found me after my biological parents died in a car accident when I was 2. Dr. Vance stood stiffly. "The modifications we made to Subject 7 enhanced her existing capabilities." "No," Emma interrupted firmly. "You ran tests, documented my abilities, and took credit for naturally occurring genetic variations. I've accessed your original research files that clearly show my enhanced intelligence predated any interventions you performed." Judge Morrison studied the evidence Emma had compiled. "Dr. Vance, is this accurate? Did your institute claim credit for naturally occurring abilities?" Dr. Vance's composure finally cracked. "The child's parents were killed in an accident. She had no family, extraordinary abilities, and we provided specialized care that regular adoption agencies couldn't offer. Our methods were ethically sound." "Your methods," Emma said coldly, "involved erasing my original identity, fabricating documentation of artificial enhancement, and treating me like laboratory equipment instead of a grieving child who'd lost her parents." Alexander felt rage building as he understood what had happened. "You made her believe she was artificially created to justify treating her as property. The ethical implications of her abilities required careful management." "The ethical implications," Judge Morrison interrupted, "are that you kidnapped a grieving child, erased her history, and convinced her she wasn't fully human to maintain control over her." Emma activated one final display showing her original birth certificate and family photos. "My name was Emma Chen. My parents were Dr. Jennifer Chen, a quantum physicist, and Dr. David Chen, a mathematician. They were killed by a drunk driver when I was 2 years old. I have a grandfather who's been searching for me for 9 years." Alexander stared at the photos showing a happy family, Emma as a toddler with parents who clearly adored her. His heart broke imagining this little girl losing everything, then being convinced she wasn't even fully human. "Emma," he said softly. You have living family. Emma turned to him with tears in her eyes. I do. But Dad, family isn't just genetics, it's choice and love. My grandfather is a wonderful man who never stopped looking for me, but you're the father who saved me when I needed saving. Judge Morrison had heard enough. Dr. Vance, your institute has no legal claim to Emma Chen. She's a naturally born human being with full rights under the law. Furthermore, your methods of custody and psychological manipulation constitute criminal fraud and kidnapping. As security escorted Dr. Vance from the courtroom, Emma threw herself into Alexander's arms. Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about my research. I was afraid if you knew I had living family, you might not want me anymore. Alexander held her tightly. Emma, nothing could ever make me not want you. You're my daughter, no matter what we discover about your past. Emma was finally free to be both the brilliant young woman she was becoming and the beloved daughter she'd always been. 6 months after the court victory, Alexander stood in his expanded home office watching Emma teach her grandfather, Dr. William Chen, how to optimize quantum computing algorithms. The 70-year-old retired physicist listened with wonder as his 12-year-old granddaughter explained concepts that challenged his decades of experience. Grandfather, Emma said patiently, your computational models assume linear progression, but quantum states exist in superposition until observation collapses the probability wave. We need algorithms that embrace uncertainty rather than eliminate it. Doctor, Chen chuckled, his eyes twinkling with pride. Emma, my dear, you've inherited your parents' brilliance and amplified it beyond anything I could have imagined. The integration of Dr. Chen into their family had been surprisingly smooth. The elderly scientist had immediately recognized Alexander's genuine love for Emma and embraced him as a son-in-law in everything but legal terms. Their home now buzzed with 3 generations of intellectual curiosity and deep affection. But this peaceful domestic scene was about to be shattered by an unexpected revelation. Emma's latest project involved developing sustainable energy solutions for developing nations. She'd been working with international organizations to implement her designs in remote communities. Today, she received a video call that would change everything. Dad, grandfather, come quickly, Emma called from her lab. There's something you both need to see. On her main monitor was Dr. Maria Santos, a representative from the Global Development Initiative. Behind her stood a group of children in what appeared to be a rural school setting. Emma, Dr. Santos said excitedly, your solar panel design has been revolutionary for our programs, but we've discovered something extraordinary in our latest implementation site. The camera panned to show the children, all approximately Emma's age, all working on advanced technical projects that seemed far beyond their apparent years. These children, Dr. Santos continued, showed up at various aid sites over the past 2 years. All claim to be orphans from different disasters. All demonstrate the same type of extraordinary intelligence you possess. Emma's face went pale as she studied the children on screen. Dr. Santos, can you show me their technical work more closely? The camera focused on the children's projects. One girl was designing water purification systems, a boy was developing agricultural optimization programs, another was creating medical diagnostic equipment, all with the same intuitive brilliance Emma displayed. Dr. Chen leaned forward, his expression troubled. Emma, these children, they're working on solutions to humanity's greatest challenges, just like you've been doing, Alexander added, a chill running down his spine. Emma began typing rapidly, accessing databases and running facial recognition software. After several minutes, she turned to face her family with a grave expression. There are 17 of them, she announced, all between ages 10 and 13. All appeared at different humanitarian sites over the past 3 years. All possess enhanced cognitive abilities identical to mine. But Dr. Vance said you were unique, Alexander protested. Dr. Vance lied about many things, Emma replied grimly. I think we're looking at other survivors of the same enhancement program, or other naturally gifted children who were taken like I was. Doctor. Chen studied the children's faces with growing alarm. Emma, if these children were all part of the same program, why are they being deployed to humanitarian sites now? Emma's brilliant mind began connecting patterns that terrified her. Because someone is using gifted children to solve global problems while keeping them isolated and controllable. We're not just dealing with one rogue institute. We're looking at a worldwide network. Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. Are you saying there's an organization placing enhanced children in strategic locations around the world? I'm saying, Emma replied, her voice heavy with implication, that my escape may have triggered a larger operation. These children aren't being rescued, they're being positioned. Dr. Santos spoke again from the monitor. Emma, there's more. Each of these children mentioned the same thing when they arrived. They said they were looking for the one who got away. I think they're looking for you. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Emma wasn't just a rescued orphan who'd found her family. She was a fugitive from a global conspiracy that was now using other children like her as unwitting agents. Dad, Emma said quietly, I think we have a much bigger problem than we realized. And I think those children are in terrible danger. The rescue mission began 3 weeks later, but not in the way Alexander had expected. Instead of rushing into danger, Emma had spent every waking hour developing what she called the Liberation Protocol, a comprehensive plan to safely extract and rehabilitate the 17 enhanced children without alerting their handlers. Dad, Emma explained, surrounded by holographic displays in their converted basement laboratory, we can't just grab these children and run. They've been psychologically conditioned to trust their current guardians. Sudden extraction could cause severe trauma. Dr. Chen, who had thrown himself into supporting Emma's mission, studied the psychological profiles she'd compiled. Emma's right, Alexander. These children believe they're helping humanity through their work. Convincing them they're being exploited will require careful psychological deprogramming. Alexander watched his daughter coordinate with international agencies, psychological experts, and covert operatives with the same methodical precision she applied to engineering problems. At 12 years old, she was running an operation that challenged government resources. I've made contact with 6 of the children through encrypted educational forums, Emma reported. They know me as Sister 7, the enhanced child who escaped the program. Some are eager to learn about life outside their assignments, others are suspicious. The breakthrough came when Emma successfully communicated with a girl named Lin, who was working on agricultural solutions in Cambodia. Lin's response changed everything. Sister 7, we know about you. The coordinators told us you were corrupted by emotional attachments and lost your purpose, but some of us have been questioning our assignments. The loneliness is becoming unbearable. Is it true that you found a family who loves you for who you are, not what you can produce? Emma's eyes filled with tears as she read Lin's message aloud. She's been alone for 3 years, believing her isolation serves a greater good. Dad, these children are suffering the same way I suffered. Then we bring them home, Alexander said firmly. All of them. The first extraction was planned for Malaysia, where a boy named Marcus was developing medical technology for a relief organization. Emma had convinced him to meet her at a predetermined location, claiming she needed help with a project only enhanced children could understand. Alexander insisted on accompanying Emma despite her protests about safety. You're 12 years old, Emma. Brilliant or not, you're not doing this alone. They arrived in Kuala Lumpur as tourists, with Dr. Chen remaining in the States to coordinate communication and support. Emma's nervousness was evident despite her careful planning. Marcus appeared at the designated cafe exactly on time. A 13-year-old boy with prematurely serious eyes and the same guarded posture Emma had once displayed. He scanned the area carefully before approaching their table. Sister 7? He asked quietly. Hello, Marcus. This is my father, Alexander. Marcus studied Alexander with obvious suspicion. The man who corrupted your programming with emotional attachments. The man who taught me that love doesn't corrupt intelligence. It completes it, Emma replied gently. For the next hour, Emma shared her story, while Alexander watched Marcus's carefully constructed walls slowly crumble. The boy's questions revealed the same desperate loneliness Emma had once felt, the same confusion about his purpose, the same hunger for genuine human connection. They told us family attachments would weaken our ability to help humanity, Marcus said finally. But you've accomplished more in 1 year with your father than I've achieved in 3 years alone. Because, Emma explained, human problems require human hearts to solve them. Intelligence without empathy creates solutions that look good on paper but fail in practice. The moment of truth came when Emma asked Marcus the crucial question. Do you want to come home with us? Marcus looked at Alexander with vulnerable hope. Would you consider adopting another enhanced child? I know I'm not as advanced as Emma in some areas. Alexander reached across the table and took the boy's hand. Marcus, every child deserves a family. Emma isn't special because she's enhanced. She's special because she's my daughter. You would be just as special. Marcus broke down crying, the first time he'd shown genuine emotion in years. As Emma comforted him, Alexander realized they weren't just rescuing enhanced children, they were rescuing wounded souls who'd been taught that their humanity was a weakness rather than their greatest strength. 1 year later, Alexander stood in the backyard of their expanded estate, watching 17 enhanced children of various ages play together in ways they'd never been allowed to experience. The former laboratory subjects were learning to be children again while maintaining their extraordinary gifts. Emma, now 13 and more confident than ever, was teaching Marcus and Lynn how to play chess, while simultaneously explaining quantum physics principles through the game moves. Nearby, other rescued children worked on collaborative projects that combined their enhanced abilities with newfound emotional intelligence. Dr. Chen approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied smile of a grandfather watching his family flourish. Alexander, I never imagined retirement would involve helping raise 17 genius children, but I can't think of a better way to spend my golden years. They're remarkable, Alexander agreed, watching how naturally the children had bonded despite their different backgrounds. Emma was right. They needed family connections to reach their full potential as human beings. The rescue operations had concluded 6 months earlier with the apprehension of the international network responsible for exploiting enhanced children. Dr. Vance and his associates faced charges in multiple countries, while the rescued children underwent intensive psychological rehabilitation. Dad! Emma called out, running over with a tablet displaying her latest innovation. I've finished the educational framework for integrating enhanced children into mainstream society. We can help other families who discover they have gifted children. Alexander studied Emma's comprehensive program, which combined academic advancement with emotional development and social integration. Emma, this could revolutionize how we approach gifted education worldwide. That's the idea, Emma grinned. But more importantly, it ensures no enhanced child ever has to choose between intellectual development and family love again. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. A convoy of black SUVs pulled into their driveway, causing the children to instinctively move closer together, a learned response from their traumatic pasts. But instead of threatening figures, familiar faces emerged. Dr. Patricia Reeves, Richard Hayes, and several officials from Child Services, all wearing broad smiles. Emma! Dr. Reeves called out, we have wonderful news! The group gathered around as Dr. Reeves presented an official document. The International Committee on Enhanced Children's Rights has officially recognized your rehabilitation program as the global standard. Additionally, the Thornfield Foundation for Gifted Youth has been approved for full operational status. Alexander felt pride swelling in his chest. Emma had transformed their personal experience into a worldwide movement to protect and nurture enhanced children while preserving their humanity. There's more, Richard Hayes added with a grin. Emma, the United Nations has invited you to address the General Assembly about children's rights and ethical treatment of enhanced individuals. Emma's eyes widened. They want me to speak at the UN? You've become the voice for enhanced children worldwide, Dr. Reeves explained. Your story proves that extraordinary abilities and normal childhood can coexist beautifully. As the celebration continued around them, Alexander pulled Emma aside for a private conversation. Emma, I want you to know how proud I am, not of your intelligence or your achievements, but of your character. You've used your gifts to help others, rather than just advancing yourself. Emma hugged her father tightly. Dad, remember that first day when you said if I could fix your engine, you'd make me CEO? You gave me more than a job. You gave me purpose. Everything I've accomplished since then came from the confidence you showed in me. And you've given me more than I ever imagined possible, Alexander replied. You taught me that being a father isn't about biology. It's about love, support, and believing in someone's potential. Dr. Chen joined them, followed by all 17 children who had come to see Alexander and Emma as their family leaders. Speech? Marcus called out, grinning. Emma should give us a speech like she'll give at the UN. Emma laughed, stepping onto their garden bench to address her unusual family. When I was 10 years old, I thought intelligence was about solving problems faster than anyone else. But this family taught me that true intelligence is about solving problems together, supporting each other, and never forgetting that our greatest strength isn't our enhanced abilities. It's our capacity to love and be loved. The children cheered, and Alexander felt tears of joy streaming down his face. 2 years ago, he'd been a lonely billionaire with a failing company. Today, he was the father of 18 extraordinary children who were changing the world through collaborative compassion. Emma had fixed far more than his engine that day. She'd fixed his understanding of what it truly meant to be human.